Lieutenant Emma Rodriguez wasn't supposed to be at the advanced sniper training course. She was a logistics officer, the person who made sure bullets arrived where they needed to be, not the person who fired them. But when a last-minute administrative error placed her name on the observer list for the Elite SEAL Sniper Qualification exercise, nobody bothered to correct it. After all, what harm could one quiet logistics officer do watching from the sidelines? She'd observe for a day, realize she was out of her depth, and go back to her spreadsheets and supply chains. At least that's what everyone assumed. But let me ask you something before we continue. Have you ever been underestimated so completely that people didn't even see you as a threat? Stay with me, because what Emma does next will rewrite everything these elite warriors thought they knew about talent. The exercise was brutal by design. 50 targets scattered across a desert range at distances from 400 to 1200 meters. Variable wind conditions. Extreme heat causing mirage effects that made accurate shooting nearly impossible. The challenge wasn't just hitting targets. It was hitting them fast, under pressure, with conditions changing by the second. This was the final qualification, the exercise that separated good snipers from legendary ones. 8 Navy SEALs, the best of the best, stood ready with custom rifles that cost more than most people's cars. These weren't just soldiers. These were men who had trained for thousands of hours, who had taken shots in actual combat that most people couldn't make on a perfect day at a shooting range. The first SEAL stepped up, Commander Jake Morrison, a veteran with 17 confirmed kills in active combat. He dropped 32 targets before time ran out. Impressive. Incredibly impressive. The observers applauded. The second SEAL managed 28. The third, 35. By the time 6 SEALs had attempted the course, the highest score was 37 targets. The instructors were pleased. These were career-best performances. The Rangemaster was already talking about how this class might set new records. Emma watched from the observation post, her face expressionless. She had been watching for 3 hours now, studying each shooter's technique, noting their breathing patterns, observing how they compensated for wind and heat. She saw their strengths. She also saw their mistakes, small errors in timing and adjustment that cost them precious seconds. The 7th SEAL stepped up, and Emma noticed something. His rifle scope's 0 was slightly off. She could see it in how his shots were grouping just left of center. He finished with 33 targets, clearly frustrated that he knew he should have done better. The 8th and final SEAL was a legend in the community. Master Chief David Chun, 42 years old, with more combat deployments than most people had birthdays. He was the standard, the measuring stick, the man other snipers aspired to become. When he took his position, the entire range fell silent. For 7 minutes, it was like watching a machine. Breathe, squeeze, hit. Breathe, squeeze, hit. No wasted motion. No hesitation. When time expired, he had dropped 41 targets. The range erupted in applause. 41 out of 50 was nearly impossible. It might be years before anyone beat that score. Master Chief Chun stood, accepting congratulations with the quiet confidence of a man who knew his worth. As he walked back toward the observation post, Emma did something that made every person on that range freeze. She stood up, stepped forward, and asked in a calm, clear voice that carried across the desert, "Can I borrow your rifle for a second?" The silence was deafening. Master Chief Chun stopped mid-stride. Commander Morrison actually laughed, thinking it was a joke. The Rangemaster looked confused, checking his roster as if he'd somehow missed that a logistics officer was cleared for live fire. She didn't explain. She simply stood there, waiting for an answer, her eyes steady and certain. Master Chief Chun studied her for a long moment. Something in her posture, in the way she stood, triggered his instincts. This wasn't the stance of someone making a joke or trying to impress people. This was the stance of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Against every protocol, against every reasonable judgment, he handed her his rifle. "All right," he said quietly. "Show me what you've got." Emma walked to the firing line like she'd done it 1,000 times before. She checked the rifle with movement so fluid and practiced that several of the SEALs exchanged glances. She made one small adjustment to the scope, so subtle that most people missed it. She took her position, and suddenly everyone realized that her body position was perfect. Textbook perfect. Better than textbook. It was the position of someone who had done this so many times that it was as natural as breathing. The range master, still confused but now intensely curious, reset the course. Emma's finger found the trigger. And then, for the next 6 minutes and 43 seconds, the desert echoed with the most extraordinary display of marksmanship most of these combat veterans had ever witnessed. She didn't just hit targets. She destroyed them with a rhythm that seemed almost supernatural. 400 meters headshot, 600 meters center mass, 800 meters another headshot. She was compensating for wind that hadn't even shifted yet, reading the mirage like it was a map written just for her. Her breathing never changed. Her position never wavered. She moved through the targets like she knew exactly where each one would appear before it did. At the 4-minute mark, she had dropped 38 targets, matching the best performance of the day. The SEALs watching had stopped talking. At 5 minutes, 45 targets down. Master Chief Chen's jaw was actually hanging open. At 6 minutes and 30 seconds, she squeezed the trigger for the 50th time. The final target, 1,200 meters away, dancing in the heat shimmer, dropped clean. 50 out of 50. Perfect score. In less than 7 minutes. Emma stood, safed the rifle, and handed it back to Master Chief Chun. Her hands weren't shaking. Her breathing was calm. She looked at him and said simply, "Your zero was 0.3 milliradians left. I adjusted it. Thank you for letting me borrow it." The range exploded with questions. Who was she? Where did she learn to shoot like that? What the hell was a logistics officer doing with skills that surpassed their best snipers? Emma's voice was quiet but clear as she answered, "I grew up in Montana. My father was a competition shooter, national champion 3 times over. I started shooting when I was 6 years old. By the time I was 16, I had more range hours than most professional snipers log in their entire careers. I joined the Navy to serve, not to shoot. They put me in logistics because of my math scores. I never corrected them. I never asked for a transfer. But I never stopped practicing either." Master Chief Chun looked at the rifle in his hands, then back at Emma. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of respect earned through undeniable skill. "Ma'am, with your permission, I'd like to forward your scores to Naval Special Warfare Command. What you just did, that's not just talent. That's gift-level ability. You shouldn't be counting bullets. You should be behind a scope where it matters." 6 months later, Emma Rodriguez became the first female graduate of the Naval Special Warfare Scout Sniper Program. She would go on to serve 3 combat deployments, with a record that remained classified but became legendary among those who knew. But she never forgot that day in the desert when she asked a simple question that changed everything. Sometimes the most extraordinary people are hiding in plain sight, waiting not for permission, but for one moment, one chance, one borrowed rifle to show the world who they really are. If this story inspired you, if you've ever had hidden talents that the world hasn't seen yet, share your story in the comments. Your gifts matter, even if they haven't been recognized yet. Subscribe if you believe that greatness doesn't always announce itself. It sometimes just quietly asks, "Can I borrow your rifle for a second?" Because the most dangerous assumption we can make is thinking we know what someone is capable of before we give them a chance to show us.